So this section is the quadratic formula. So first we're just going to refresh our memory. Before, when we had a quadratic we wanted to solve, we solved by factoring. So this will factor in x minus 2, x plus 1. So we'll have x minus 2 is 0, or x plus 1 is 0. And we would get our two answers. When we try to factor this one, we would need two numbers that multiply to 2 but add to 5. Well, there aren't any. This would be a prime. And so we don't know how to solve them if they're equal to 0 and we need to solve, but we can't factor. So what that means is factoring isn't always going to work to solve these quadratic equations. So what we can do is use our quadratic formula. So the key thing is, given a quadratic formula, notice A is the coefficient of x squared, B is the coefficient of x, and then C is just the constant. We will use this formula, negative b plus or minus square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. So now, using the quadratic formula, notice our a is going to be 3, our b is negative 5, and our c is negative 2. And remember, our quadratic formula is negative b plus or minus square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. So when we use that, we're going to have x equals negative 5 plus or minus square root of this negative 5 squared minus 4 times our a times our c all over 2 times our a. Now we just use our order of operations. So a negative times a negative is a positive 5. Negative 5 squared is positive 25. And then we've got a negative 4 times 3 is negative 12. Times a negative 2 is a positive 24. Still all over 6. So I'll have 5 plus or minus 25 plus 24 is 49 over 6. So we'll have x equals 5 plus or minus square root of 49 is 7. Still over 6. So now we've got two options. We've got 5 plus 7 over 6, and we've got 5 minus 7 over 6. Because remembering, when we factor, we'd have at least two answers. So 5 plus 7 would give us 12 over 6, which is 2. This one, if we have 5 minus 7, we're left with negative 2 over 6, which is negative 1/3. And those are our answers. Same thing here. Let's start by looking. Our a is 3, our b is negative 2, our c is negative 3. Our quadratic formula is negative b plus or minus square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. So we will have negative 2 plus or minus square root of this negative 2 squared minus 4ac all over 2 times a. Once again, a negative 2 is positive. Negative 2 squared is a positive 4. And now we've got negative 4 times 3 is negative 12 times negative 3 gives us a positive 36 all over 6 again. So we'll have 2 plus or minus square root of 40 over 6. And we can break down the square root of 40. It's 4 and 10, 2 and 2, 5 and 2. So here's a squared. And now, remember this is 2, 6 plus or minus 2 root 10 over 6. We can break this up into two fractions, which is the same thing as 1/3 plus or minus, those will cancel up to 3, so root 10 over 3. Since we can't simplify anymore because of that root 10, you can leave it like this. So this one, our A is 1, our B is 2, and our C is 3. Our quadratic formula So using our quadratic formula, we'll have a negative 2 plus or minus square root 2 squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Whoops, and we don't have an x, we've got an a. So negative 2 plus or minus square root 2 squared is 4. Negative 4 times 1 is negative 4, times 3 is negative 12. All over 2. And so we'll have negative 2 plus or minus square root of negative 8. All over 2. Remember, 8 is 2 times 4, 2 times 2. Because of that negative, we'll have an I, so 2I root 2. All over 2. We can break this up. We'll have with negative 1 plus or minus, these two will cancel. I root 2. Now on this one, notice we don't really want to deal with our fractions. And so, thinking back to how we've taken care of this before, we can multiply everything by a common denominator, which would be 6. So here we're going to be left with 4r squared minus 3r equals negative 2. But then notice we still need it equal to 0, so we have to add our 2 to both sides. And now, our A is 4, our B is negative 3, and our C is 2. So when we go to our quadratic formula, negative B plus or minus square root of B squared minus 4AC all over 2A. We can't break the 23 down anymore, but we can bring out an I, and we can separate it into two fractions. And that's all we can do. Now this one, once again, we don't have it equal to 0. So let's go ahead and add 30 to both sides. But notice we also don't have a v term. So we can add that in with a 0v. And now our a will be 5, our b is 0, and our c is 30. So when we use our quadratic formula, negative b plus or minus square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Well, negative 0 doesn't do anything, so we're left with 0 plus or minus. 0 squared is 0. 4 times 5 is 20. 20 times 30 would give us a negative 600 all over 10. So left with plus or minus square root of negative 600 over 10, which are plus or minus 10 I root 6 over 10. The 10s can cancel. We're left with plus or minus I root 6. And that is the quadratic formula.